Welcome to the episode, or no, I'm going to start over. Okay. Welcome to the podcast, Ty.
Thanks.
We
I'm
are
really excited to be here.
So happy to have you here, and this is going to be a really valuable conversation for the mamas who listen to hear.
Okay.
So I have shared my story a lot, our gut health journey, a lot on this podcast, on my Instagram, Olive Only, and I wanted to bring Ty on for him to share his perspective with you, because a lot of times mamas come and they say, how do I get my partner on board? How do I get my partner to see the value in nurturing our family's gut health? He just loves his junk food or whatever it is, and he doesn't want to change. How do I do this? So Ty's here to share his perspective on our journey with you, where we started. And so I'm just going to kind of give it to you.
Okay. Well, let me just start with what makes me part of me. I'm essentially a skeptic and a pessimist. I think a lot of times that's why Sarah and I work well together, because she's an optimist. She is always searching and hoping, and I'm just like, I don't know, that seems kind of woo-woo. But the thing that always works is that she has intuition that drives her in a certain direction. And whether I am 100% on board at the beginning, what happens is things change, results occur. And when that happens, it creates the ability for me to just say, well, okay, I think she is right. I grew up in a traditional house in Utah. I had have three sisters. We went to Western doctors. We ate processed foods. I was not a vegetarian, vegan. I had no dietary restrictions whatsoever. We had soda in the house all the time. It was just a regular upbringing in Utah at the time. And so when our son was born, and it was clear that he wasn't well.
But let's backtrack just a little bit. Fill in that gap of when we met and how you slowly evolved.
Sure.
And we had our daughter. We can keep that really brief, because the story really does, our gut health journey really does begin with our son being born. But you also had this transformation getting there,
right,
that I feel like is important to the story.
Okay. So you were vegan when we met.
Yes.
We met in a triathlon class, so we were both active. But I also was just out of rehab. I was still smoking cigarettes, but trying to change my life, right? And so when we started dating, there were a lot of things that I needed to change in my life if I wanted to be a part of Sarah's life. And slowly...
And to really paint the picture of how this works, of what Ty is saying, is he is I wouldn't say you're a pessimist. Pessimist. I would say he is the very practical one in our relationship, and I'm the dreamer and the optimist. Well, when I met Ty, I saw an AA book on his bookshelf, and I thought, oh my gosh, this guy, his dad must be an alcoholic, and he has that book so that he can support his dad. Before he told me that he had gone to treatment. And I didn't know he smoked. He didn't drive because he had too many DUIs, that his driver's license had been taken away. And I thought he didn't drive because he was so eco-friendly that he didn't want to have a car, so he rode his bike everywhere. And this is the nature of how our relationship began. And I think what makes it really powerful.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the strong emphasis of the dynamics of our relationship, of him being I don't even know how you describe that in terms of though, like with addiction and recovery and smoking and like, because that's not like the practical, but that's just like
We were as far away, lifestyle wise, as two people could be, except we had this one thing in common where that we did triathlons, and I know it sounds silly that I smoked and did triathlons, but anyways, I was doing better. I was doing better. And so when we started dating and we'd go out to dinner or whatever, I would get what I would always get, chicken or steak or whatever, and she always got vegan items.
My plant-based.
Because she was a vegan when we met. She was plant-based when we met. And so, okay, fast forward to we're married. And she's still cooking me chicken at night. You would make a salad for yourself. And I assumed that all my evolution had ended. I was married. I didn't have to grow anymore as a human. We would be fairly depressed and unhappy for the rest of our lives until some magical thing happened. We became rich, or our kids grew up. Whatever it was, I don't know. I assumed that you just go through this general phase of malaise until you retire, and then happiness occurs. But Sarah wasn't ever on that track. She was always striving for better. And so we got pregnant unexpectedly. And it was a life changer for both of us. I think it really cemented our commitment to each other. I think that it made us realize that it was time to kind of change some things in our life and that we needed to grow together. Now, growth takes time, and we are still growing together. But that was like the first, like, okay, we have more responsibility than just Sarah and I, and we have to start creating the family that we want. And so at that point, Sarah was very adamant that she wanted to raise our kids plant-based. And I was not fully on board, but I said, okay, listen, I will become vegetarian. Let's at least take that.
So he read a couple of books because we both agreed that it was important for us to passionately raise our children in alignment. So one way or the other, whether that's consuming animal products or not, we wanted to make that decision intentionally. And so Ty read a couple of books, and it became clear that he did not want our children consuming animal products. And that's really a whole different story that maybe we can make a whole episode on the why behind plant-based, because I've not really included that much in our gut health journey. It's not really it's not the key factor.
Yeah.
It's a big part of our lifestyle, but I've never really talked about it on the podcast even, because I'm not here to promote veganism or any type of diet. I am simply here to educate on the significance of our gut health and what we can do to strengthen and heal our guts. And being plant-based is definitely a big part of our lifestyle, but it's
that's good to be clear about what you're talking about.
It's not the driver behind anything with Only Organics or this podcast. But it is a big part of our lifestyle. And so let's do an episode on that sometime of the why we choose to be plant-based.
So I decide, okay, I'm fine. I will just cut out meat. I'll still have milk with my coffee. I'll still have cheese on my tacos. And that's how we lived for several years. Our daughter was, I don't know, she's 2 or 3.
I think she's 3.
And we're having dinner. I had just put a giant, you got those bags of cheese from Costco, a giant handful of cheese on my rice and beans. And she came and said, Dad, can you...
The planet and the animals in your body would be so much healthier if you didn't have that cheese.
Yeah. And so
We
I don't
didn't have dairy.
I don't know if you guys can think back about when you have your first child and they are speaking to you. It's like a direct funnel to your heart. And uh and at that point I was like, okay, absolutely, Luna, we're done. And so then I started eating plant-based too. And I was probably pretty dirty plant-based because I still had I was always trying to make things seem like they were not plant-based. So but that's not here or there. And so anyway, so I begrudgingly jumped on the bandwagon of plant-based for the Bennett family. And I wasn't always happy about it, but I didn't really miss meat when I became vegetarian, and eventually I didn't really think about dairy either. It just kind of went away.
And so, while this isn't like what this episode particularly is about, I think that it really speaks to the evolution of change over time.
Yeah, and you weren't pounding into me every day. You have to do this. You have to do this.
Mm-mm.
It was.
We created a life. So whether we're speaking to being plant-based or to what we're going to get into in just a minute of being gut health focused, actually, we're not even going to get there today. Today, this episode is about our son being born and the first 2.5 years of his life until we learned that all of his symptoms were connected to his gut. This is going to be a multiple part series because I really want to walk you through this journey through Ty's perspective and the two of us together. And so all of this is part of the story though. And this evolution that we had as a family from the time of becoming pregnant with our first Luna to our second child being born really matters. Yeah. Because had our second child been born and we had not gone through all of that, I think that our journey would have been very different. And we had this opportunity to align on many levels before his birth. And so when Luna, our first, was 3.5, our second was born.
Right.
And by this point, our family we were eating really clean. We were, we didn't have processed foods in our home. I've always been really conscientious about GMOs and really mindful about only bringing in plant-based detergents and no chemicals into our home. We were really mindful. We felt like we were doing everything right. And I get this message a lot from moms on Instagram saying, I'm already doing everything right. What else can I do? And we can relate to that.
For sure.
So much. We were doing everything that we knew possibly right. And we weren't doing anything wrong. And if your child's struggling with symptoms, you're not doing anything wrong. Okay. Now, Aki, our second, is born in January of 2014.
And pretty soon, it's clear that he is really uncomfortable. I'd just never seen rashes or somebody willing to scratch themselves so much that they would bleed before in my life. I'd never experienced it. I'd never experienced a child who was so uncomfortable that they couldn't sleep, that they had to nurse. It felt like 24/7, and a level of fear and exhaustion that was just overwhelming. It was overwhelming. Sarah and I didn't know what to do, and we had no concept of how to get any help.
And up to this point, we had never needed any medical help. We had our daughter at a birth center. We had our son at a birth center. Both pregnancies were really strong and beautiful, and same with the births. And our children had never needed to go to the doctor for a medical need.
Yeah.
And
But when he was born, it was tearing our marriage apart. It was tearing Sarah apart. She was obsessed with trying to find him help. And I was obsessed with trying to help her. And it was awful. This was awful.
And we clashed really hard at this point, because Ty's upbringing is telling him,
go to the doctor.
Go to the doctor. We need to go to a GI doctor. They say to get him a colonoscopy. We got to just do what the doctors say. They're the experts. And inside of me, I was willing to do anything, of course, because our son was so unwell. I mean, over 2.5 years of struggling, we did take him to every kind of doctor.
Yeah.
But, doctors would, the first pediatrician is like, oh, eczema, this is really normal. A lot of babies have eczema. It's not a big deal. Here's this prescription for a steroid cream. And Ty's like, why aren't you filling that prescription?
I'm so mad.
Just help. You've got to help him. You can't not put that on him. And inside of me, I have this polar message just screaming at me that is not, it's not right. That's not okay. That's not going to help our child. It might mask this symptom, but it's not the answer. And I'm not putting that on his body. And
we were constantly clashing.
Yeah.
Because I felt like we need to listen to the people who've told us what to do. And, because what else do we do? And over a period of time, it became clear that Sarah was searching and continuing to search for better answers. And so we went and saw and eventually I came on board and said, we just need to find somebody you will listen to what they will tell you.
Yes.
And so
in the meantime too, I had hit this level of burnout, and our whole marriage thus far, I wanted a different life for our family. I was searching for something different. I wanted something more fulfilling that was our life, that wasn't the American dream. We had a beautiful new home in a brand new neighborhood with kids all around, and I should have been happy, but I was so unhappy. And our son struggling really put this extra layer of, I don't belong in this lifestyle. I don't fit in here. Neighbors are telling me, Sarah, this is just how boys are. Boys just behave this way. Just get used to this. And I felt so isolated and so alone. And outside of our lifestyle, like, our family didn't get it. They didn't understand. You can't understand the severity of struggle our son was experiencing unless if you are in it. And we were so isolated and alone. And on top of that, Ty was a traveling salesman at the time, and he would leave every other week to travel for 4 or 5 days. And I was at home mothering our 2 children by myself in the dead of Montana winter. It's so cold that the frost is growing onto the inside of our door. And I hit this utter burnout. And I remember sending Ty a message saying, I can't do this anymore. I'm buying a motorhome and we're going to travel with you for work. And
well, it was one of those things where I wasn't going to argue. It was just like, all right, well, if you do that, go ahead. Whatever.
We were already on the rocks. Yeah. Like, our marriage was already struggling so badly.
So I was like, whatever, go ahead, fine.
We're a year and a half into our son's journey at this point. Yeah. And I'm so sorry. So I'm recording this. I don't know. I mentioned it in the intro too, but I'm also sharing this on YouTube in case if you want to, like, come into our little cabin with us and feel like you're sitting here and being part of this conversation. So I'm recording it on video, and this notification keeps going off, so I just need to silence it. Okay.
So I assume that this will be an idea, we'll argue about it for a little while, and it'll peter out. There was absolutely no way in my mind that I had worked so hard for us to buy a home, and that then we were going to go move into a trailer. It was the craziest thing I had ever heard. It made zero sense to me. And but Sarah has a way of just being consistent.
When I have an idea, I am determined, and I have this like really deep, all moms have this really deep wisdom of what's best for your family. And I knew that if I didn't leave, I didn't catch a breath from our life that I felt so trapped in, I was going to lose myself. I was going to lose my marriage, and I was never going to be able to heal our child. And so I wasn't backing down. This was like the only answer that made any sense to me. And so Ty agreed. So in the midst of trying to find health for our son, we minimized our life a lot. We moved into an old motorhome, and we traveled for 4 months. And in that 4-month period, our life changed.
For sure. It was probably one of the worst phases that we ever experienced. I was recalcitrant and stubborn. I did not want to be in a shitty motorhome. I wanted to be in our nice, beautiful home in Montana. I wanted to be around my friends and riding bikes, and I was really resentful. And Sarah was working emotional overdrive to try and make me happy. And we all know that you can't make your partner happy no matter what you do. They need to be happy. They need to find happiness.
But I was just so grateful that he begrudgingly agreed to do this, that
I made her pay.
But I was going to do anything to make it work.
Yeah. And we finally, after 3.5 months, we were finally in an area where we'd slowed down. We were in Yellowstone. We were no internet. Yeah, there was no internet. There was no interruptions. And it seemed like the first time that Sarah and I were able to sit down and communicate. And I had the capacity to finally listen to what she was saying. And it was as if a switch flipped, because I finally understood what she was trying to explain to me. Not just about our marriage, but about our work-life balance, about the health of our child. And it finally clicked for me that I was willing to follow her and do whatever was required so that all of these things could heal. Because they were all connected. They all needed to heal because they were all absolutely broken. And
something you need to understand is, before we moved into the motorhome, we had settled into habits that weren't conducive to a healthy marriage. I would snuggle, we co-sleep with our children, and I would lay down with them, and I would not get up at night. Ty would watch Netflix from the time we got our kids to sleep at 7 until he came to bed at 10. And I would be endlessly Googling my child's symptoms and what's causing his symptoms, and sobbing with fear, because I knew that his symptoms were getting worse, and there were more symptoms stacking on. And I just knew deep inside of me that if we didn't figure out how to heal our child from the inside, all of his symptoms were leading him to disease. And so leading up to the motorhome, we were coexisting.
Yeah.
And when we moved into the motorhome, we suddenly found ourselves, and I didn't know this was going to happen going into it, but we were in this small space where there wasn't room to hide from each other. We didn't have service a lot of times, and so Netflix wasn't an option. Googling symptoms wasn't an option, and we were forced to communicate. And That's why the first 3.5 months were really hard, because for the first time in our marriage, we had to communicate.
There was nowhere to hide.
There was nowhere to hide our emotions or our bodies. And we had a lot of stuff to work through. And so we hit this 3.5 month point where we're on our way back home, and everything just suddenly became very clear to both of us. And this period of time gave me a break from social pressures and all of the noise around us to really tune into myself. And I've always had a very strong intuition, but when there's a lot of noise around you, it's really hard to listen. And in this break of time, I had space to get clear with myself and how to heal our child from inside of me, not all these external voices. So we went back home and
dedicated, committed to changing our lives.
We're going to take everything that we just learned and we're going to implement it back into our old life.
Which within 5 days, we were like, it was the same thing. Netflix was on, I was working on my computer, or I had a project outside that I needed to get done. Sarah was upstairs with the children, or sitting next to me, and we hadn't had spoken a word to each other in an hour. It was immediately back to it, and we looked at each other and said, okay, this is clear, it's not working.
Our new understanding of life doesn't fit into our old lifestyle. So we quickly, we sold the motorhome, we sold all of our cars, we pretty much got rid of everything we owned. We found long-term renters for our house, and we bought an Airstream because we were dedicated now to traveling full-time and figuring our family out, figuring out our dreams that align with one another. And this really granted us, Ty was a traveling salesman, so that's how we made it work. We simply followed his sales calls and where he needed to be, and it worked. It was amazing. For the first time, we owned our life. We were not settling for a life that you just fall into. And it also gave us space and exposure to new ideas of healing. And one of these was, we met someone while traveling, and she's like, oh, one of my best friends is a Ayurvedic functional medicine practitioner. She's amazing. So I was like, okay, perfect. So I call this woman, and I just, at this point, I think you were just like, yes, like we'll try anything. We'll do anything. And because we've changed our life, and we're experiencing this level of happiness that we've never experienced, but we're also still very broken. Our son is not sleeping. He is breastfeeding upwards of 20 times a night. I mean, or just not ever detaching. We're sleeping in separate beds because our son's sleep is so restless. He's kicking and thrashing all night long, and he's still covered in an itchy rash. As he got older, he was having these behavioral outbursts that rattled the walls of our home and our hearts. And I mean, it chokes me up thinking about them, but like, he would purposefully hurt our daughter, and you could just see like the pain in his eyes. I remember driving one day. Do you remember? We were like passing Las Vegas, I think. And we were stuck in traffic, and he's in the back row of the truck, and I couldn't get to him. I couldn't help him, and we were stuck. And he's like pulling out his hair and screaming. And I mean, his behavior was soul rattling. And oh man. Anyways, we were willing to try anything. I signed up for this to work with this functional medicine Ayurvedic woman, and it was thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, and nothing was making any difference. Like, we tried every elimination diet. We were plant-based by choice, but we are also soy-free, nut-free, corn-free, wheat-free, gluten-free, everything free for these long periods of time. And with the guidance of different healthcare specialists, and nothing was working. And okay, I want you to take over a little bit here.
Well, I mean, the emotion that I'm feeling right now is what the fear that I had. So, as a parent, all of your worst tendencies. So I've dealt with severe depression. I've dealt with drug and alcohol addiction. I've dealt with a lot of pain, and I couldn't, as I saw my son hurting himself, it scared me so much that that would be part of what his life was, of pain and hurting himself and depression, and it was really awful day. And
I'm going to insert right here in this episode, I have this recording that I share in the course, and it's a story of a time where you broke down, where you were sobbing in fear. And I share this story in the course, so I feel like it's really timely. I'm going to plug it into the episode right here.
Okay. And so as we're still searching, and we're traveling, so we're also seeing doctors on the road. So we're in Phoenix, and we go see
get his blood drawn.
We're doing allergy testing. We're doing, and he's allergic to everything. And we're taking him to the blood bank to get his blood tests done. And I mean, it was unending. And then finally,
I had been on a wait list for a naturopath, ironically in our hometown, for many, many, many months. And I got a call saying that they had a cancellation for the day after. Do you want to take it? And we were over 1,000 miles away, and we booked it. We came back, and we walked into this naturopath, and I just had this overwhelming feeling that I needed to let everything from the past go. I needed to go. I was dedicated to following this naturopath's lead. I was going to let every piece of advice before this time go, and I was going to go all in. And
I was at the same stage. I was so broken by not knowing what to do that there was absolutely no part of me that was like, well, this is a bunch of hooey. It was like, I will take anything. I will do anything at this point so that we can change this.
Within the container, though, that it was going to heal his body. Yeah. We were not, I refused any treatment that was going to focus on any specific symptom. I wasn't interested in alleviating symptoms individually. I was on a mission to find true healing for his whole body, because it was so obvious that all of it was connected. He would have these bursts of time where his skin would flare up and his sleep would be worse and his poop smelled really sour, and it seemed like he's pooping all day long. Yeah. And his symptoms would flare all together. And up to this point, there wasn't a single healthcare professional that would listen to me when I'd say, I just know all of his symptoms are connected. His sleep, his behavior, all of it is connected. Nobody was listening. And this naturopath did.
Yeah.
He listened, and he said, you're right. All of his symptoms are connected. They are all connected to an imbalance in his gut bacteria. And I think this is the perfect place to wrap this episode
Yeah.
up, because I want you to hear it with me and Ty. What happened from this point in time where we are sitting in this naturopath's office to, I've really broken this down into 4 episodes because there's so much. Healing the gut isn't this over and done thing. I want you to hear about our journey starting to heal our child and what that looked like. And then I want to take you on the evolution of that journey to where we are today and what it looks like, and how we now are partners in a business of sharing the awareness of how significant gut health is. And so, Ty, thank you for sharing, and you are always so humble, and you're a real gift.
Thanks, sweetie.